Today is a very important day because it's Father's Day. And I think I can say with some degree of certainty that every one of us has a father at some point. And I thought, where did it come from? So I found a reliable source of information, so the professors here can give me full credit for this, the almanac. And not only that, it's the old almanac. And actually it says the forgotten history of Father's Day. And it's very interesting to me because it did not become a national holiday until 1972. So it's, for us who are not too old, it's a recent development. However, there is a Southern European tradition that goes back to the year 1508, specifically in Italy. But one of our Quaker presidents, who is somewhat interesting, Richard Nixon, is the person who actually formally declared this day in June as Father's Day. And so that's the original history of it, but it was a great controversy. Everybody knows Mother's Day, right? Without question, there's no controversy about Mother's Day. And the biggest one was one historian wrote that Father's Day scoffed at the holiday's sentimental attempts to domesticate manliness. Whatever manliness is, I have no idea. And he further said, with flowers and gift giving. How can we do that for fathers? He said. But then the ladies got involved, as happens in most good things. The first known Father's Day service occurred in Fairmont, West Virginia on July 3rd, 1908, to honor the men who died in the largest single coal mining accident in the history of the United States. And so all the women got together. 80 men died in that. And the women got together and created this day to honor them. Then there was a lady in Spokane, Washington, by the name of Sonora Smart Dodd. And she was inspired by the Mother's Day, and she said we should do something for fathers. So she went to the Spokane Ministerial Association and asked them, and the Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA, to set aside a Sunday in June. And the ministers chose the third Sunday in June. They did not say, we'll take it. To the third Sunday in June. And the reason, ministers, is they needed more time after Mother's Day to prepare their sermons. That was the reason given. Interesting, huh? So anyway, it became a national holiday, and it wasn't until actually the first bill was introduced in Congress in 1913 by Woodrow Wilson. It did not pass. 8 years later, Calvin Coolidge tried it again, signed a resolution to celebrate more intimate relations between fathers and their children and to impress upon fathers the full measure of their obligation. And then in 1966, Lyndon Johnson signed an executive order that the holiday be celebrated on the third Sunday in June. But it wasn't until Nixon in '72 actually got the act passed by Congress to make Father's Day a national holiday. And the lady Sonora passed away shortly thereafter at the age of 96. So she waited until she actually got it done. So that's a little bit of history. Now, I would like to recognize our true Father, our Heavenly Father, and I would like for us to stand up and say the Lord's Prayer as an opening to set the stage for today. And I think most of us still remember it, okay? So, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this as we forgive those who trespass. That day our daily bread. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. Remember this day, and we may have, after the worship songs, there may be some time, whether you can stand up and share about your father or experiences as a father. So, Madam.
Just a word about our first hymn. It's a fairly familiar hymn. There's a story about the tune. Some say that it was a tune found in a bottle washed up on the shore. And so in some hymnals you will see it attributed to Tony Bottle. But the text was written by James Russell Lowell in the 19th century as Texas was considering whether to become a slave state or a free state. And so this is a very strong call to take action against the evils of slavery. And as you sing it, if you know that background, you'll realize that it is a call to action against injustice.
Time may change and good on We're going a little off script if you're following the bulletin, because we did want to open up some time for people to share perhaps a pearl of wisdom, perhaps a short story, perhaps a lesson learned from a dad or a dad figure, or being a dad. If there's something that you want to share in the meeting now that we can share and honor this Father's Day. Carol has a microphone, and we don't mean to spring this on you or anything like that, but what are you thinking of as far as a dad or a dad figure, or a lesson about being a dad? Anyone who wants to break the ice before I start calling names? There you go, Paul.
Well, so grateful to be a dad, and grateful for being married to Carla and having 3 amazing daughters. Yeah, just a lot of fun doing stuff together, and just a real high privilege. Got a letter today from Olivia, who said, "Thank you for taking me to the Yale Art Museum when I was 5. And she said, you had us, she said, people were looking at the artwork, but we brought charcoal and watercolor paper to actually sit down and sketch the artwork that the artists saw. Look at the artwork from the artist's perspective." And I'd forgotten about that, but I just remember some of the art lessons that I had as a kid. And, helping my kids, develop a sense of, structure and line and that kind of thing. And that made me think this morning about my parents, just amazing people. Of course, Stu and others, and Fred. You guys knew Alvin and Lucy. But one of the things that they did in Ecuador when I was in the 5th grade, is that they got parents together, and over summer school, or over summer vacation, they organized an art program and a drama program and a music program for children, and hired professional artists and professional musicians to help those creativity gifts develop. And so, just grateful for my parents and their generation, but also anything that we've learned from our parents, we have the opportunity to pass that on to others. So just extremely grateful for dads and moms on this special day.
Yeah, it's nice to think about your father. I remember I was in the Army. I was in Geneva, Switzerland, and I was walking along the street, and I noticed a store that sold cigars. My father loved his cigars. I went in and asked, "Could you box Havana cigars?" "Yes, and we'll sell them to your father." And that's what happened. They were mailed to him. Being in Switzerland and Dad in the United States, we're together still. And so he got his cigars. Mom told me he really liked them. So I'll have to go back to Geneva someday and buy some more cigars, I guess.
I want to tell you 2 stories, one about the fun of being a dad, and the other's about my dad. When we were living in Scotland, our 2nd and 3rd year during my postgraduate work, we lived, as some of you know, on a 2,000-acre estate. We lived in the servants' quarters of a Victorian castle. And the driveways coming back to that castle were almost a mile long and bordered with rhododendrons. It was gorgeous in the spring. And part of that 2,000-acre estate was a 9-hole golf course. And so our children, David and Carol Joy, would love to go into the rhododendrons and find golf balls, which they would sell back. Well, it's fun being a dad. So Shirley was complicit in this. She would take the children to school in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon. And one day, I took some of their golf balls and planted them so that they would see one on the driveway coming back, and when they'd find that one, they'd see another one on the edge of the driveway, and further into the depths of the rhododendrons, where I was hiding with a squirt gun. They've never forgotten that, but they have forgiven me. So it's really fun being a dad, especially if you have a implicit wife. The story about my dad is very moving to me. When I was 17, we bought my first car, which was a 1950 Ford, for which we paid $50. And it needed some work. And one of the tasks that I set for myself was to paint the dashboard. My dad had funded painting the car, and it was beautiful. But I just really liked the idea of painting the dashboard lavender. I had never spray painted before. But I bought some lacquer paint and sprayed, and I would get it just right and then think, it needs one more pass. I'd give it one more pass and it would run. And I'd sand it. So this evening job turned into almost an all-night job, and I finally got it right. But what I didn't tell you is that, of course, we didn't own a compressor and a spray gun, but Uncle Mike did. Uncle Mike was a dear friend of Mom and Dad, and he spent every Saturday evening and every Sunday evening at our house, drinking coffee and talking. He loaned me the spray gun. It was a very precious spray gun to him. And I took it back after I used it. And this is the story of my dad. Mike complained to Dad that I had not cleaned the spray gun. And a spray gun using industrial automotive paint must be cleaned, or it'll jam and maybe be destroyed. Mike complained to Dad that Irv had not cleaned the spray gun. Dad and I had never talked about that, but he knew me, and without even asking me, he assured Mike that if I borrowed it, I cleaned it. And he was right. The fact that he had confidence in me was such an incredible lift to my self-esteem. That's what a good father does.
Very few of the people in this room knew my father. He died early at 62, but one thing that he had that I hope I got a little bit of was persistence. When he's still a young man, got married at 21 or 22, something like that, he'd want to go to college and didn't go and didn't go and didn't go and didn't go. So until finally he had 5 children at home, working full-time. He went to Cascade College. If some of you know where Cascade College was and still is as a community college. We lived a mile from there. So he would work all night at the post office, come home, go to class, fall asleep, sometimes in class, sometimes after he got back home. And he did that for 6 years. For 6 years he went to get his bachelor's degree. A little twist on his persistence was my mother. He had said repeatedly that he wanted to go to college from the time they got married. And so we were close to Cascade College, and he went up and he signed up and got all these classes. Then about a week before school was supposed to start, he went to her and says, you know, why don't you take that music class that I was signed up for, and I'll take the Bible class. I'm just going to drop all the rest of them. And those of you who knew my mother knew she could do this. She got in his face, and I believe her when she announced it. And I said, David, you have wanted to go to college all of your life. You are going to go to college. And he did. So in 6 years, he had his bachelor's degree. The reason I say persistence, 6 more years, he had a master's degree. He ended up with a teaching credential, a principal credential, and a superintendent credential, and did all of those things. And I just look at that and say, if you could do that at 36, I think, when he started school, then anybody can do anything, because that's a lot to do. And then for those of you who were at our celebration last week or have seen them at other times, you know that we are extremely proud of our 2 sons who play the piano. And the first thing that people ask us when they see us and know they play the piano is, well, you both play the piano too, don't you? And I indicate that on a good day without help, I can find middle C. So it's fun being a dad, fun being a father-in-law, and it's fun having a wife who supports that.
My dad was a magnificent trickster and joker, and I'm going to tell you one story. We went to visit an aunt who lived in Oklahoma, and we were pretty small, elementary school or something. And we had never met her, but their house was very elaborate and, served meals on fine china and all this stuff. And I could tell Mom was always going, be careful, don't break anything. And she had this beautiful coffee table, a marble top coffee table in the living room. And my dad, it seems like felt pens had just come out or something, or it was sort of a new thing. But he went in the living room and drew a little line across the corner of this marble table, and it truly looked like a crack. And so he said, you girls, did you bump that? And she came in to see what was going on. And you could just see, even me as a child, the blood drained from her face and stuff. But, in Oklahoma, they're very hospitable. And she said, oh, it's okay. Even as a child, I could tell she was about to faint, And then my dad went over and he said, what did you do? And then he took his handkerchief and wiped it off, and he goes, oh, thank goodness we could fix that.
I'm short. So was my daddy. He was only about 5'3". But he gave great hugs. But he had a problem with writing down recipes, and I'd ask him for recipes. Oh, honey, it's really easy. You just do this, this, and this. Daddy, can't you write it down? No, honey, it's really simple. You just do this, this, and this. I still don't have that recipe. But when we moved to Medford as a married couple, when I was married and we had children down there, and sometimes utensils would start looking like tools of destruction. Gotta go buy a new spatula, gotta go buy a new this. And here comes a care package from my papa with everything I need. I don't know how he knew that I needed a new spatula, that I needed a new paring knife, that I needed this and that, but it was in the box. When Daddy got old, and it was close to his time, something really amazing happened that I could never explain, because I still lived in Medford. He was up here. And we came up one Memorial weekend, and I was in the kitchen, and Mama came in. She says, Daddy doesn't want you to know, but he had some kind of an attack on Sunday night. And I turned to her and I said, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, wasn't it? Because that's when I sat up straight in bed with the most ungodly heart pain. It was my daddy. And we kept in contact, Mom and I. And even one time when we were on the phone talking, and I said, Mama, go take Daddy his pills. She didn't question. She put down the phone, grabbed his pills, went down the hall, and Daddy was coming out of the bedroom to get his pills. Every time he had an angina attack, so did I. And I was 300 miles away. We can't explain these things. But I'm glad I had them. I had a great daddy, and I miss him. And he had a sense of humor too.
Okay. As most of you know, I'm from Cuba, or Cuba, whatever you want to call it. The last time I was in Cuba was in 2010. That was, well, you do the math. My math skills are not here. That was the last time I saw my dad in person. But one memory I have when I was younger, I know, I look, for most of you, probably I look 20 years old, and I think more than and 10 years or more older than that. But one memory that I have when I was younger was my dad taught me how to ride a bike. So, yes, one of the good memories I have of them. Yeah. I haven't seen him for that long, but we keep in contact. I called him this morning through WhatsApp, so we talked a few. Well, just that.
morning, everybody. Today's reading comes from Daniel 2, 1 through 6, 10 through 12, and 14 through 19. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed such dreams that his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. So the king commanded that his magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had such a dream that my spirit is troubled by the desire to understand it. The Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal the interpretation. The king answered the Chaldeans, This is a public decree. If you do not tell me both the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you do tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. That seems like a... I don't know if I'd want to tell that. The Chaldeans answered the king, There is no one on earth who can reveal what the king demands. In fact, no king, however great and powerful, has asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king is asking is too difficult, and no one who can reveal it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with the mortals. Because of this, the king flew into a violent rage and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. Then Daniel responded with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the king's chief executioner, who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked Arioch, the royal official, Why is the decree of the king so urgent? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. So Daniel went in and requested that the king give him time, and he would tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his home and informed his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions, with the rest of the wise men of Babylon, might not perish. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven.
Thank you, Kevin. Revisiting these stories, I'm realizing how I get the stories wrong. If I was asked before reading it to retell that story about Nebuchadnezzar and the king, I would have gotten it wrong because I didn't realize what he was asking. The crucial nature of that he was putting these wise men in. So as I was spending some time in this story, if you notice that the story hasn't resolved quite yet, that's going to be for a later message. So we're about halfway through the chapter. But as I was spending some time reading, learning, thinking about this story, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question in the true spirit of the nature of what I wanted to say, because there was something playing in my head the whole time that I was spending time in the story. So in popular culture, for 200 points, this game show had an iconic jingle that served as a countdown. What is it? Jeopardy! So I can picture that song playing in the background while Daniel and his friends We're trying to figure out what is the king's dream and what is the interpretation of it. A little bit about that jingle, though, is it was interesting. Written by Merv Griffin and created for his son initially. And it was originally called Time for Tony. Also rumored to have been written in under a minute. Now this One Sweet Serenade has become synonymous for an intense high-pressure situation. And does anybody care to, except the ones that I already told, anybody care to tell me the title of that song, of that jingle now? Does anybody know it? Anybody online know it? Don't Google it. The title of that song is Think! Exclamation point. Think. And so whenever I read the story, I can't help but hear that jingle in the back of my head while Daniel and his companions are seeking the mercy of God on what to do with this crisis and situation that they've been thrust into. What did the king dream, and what is the interpretation? And yet here it is an example of someone who is a master at the wisdom inherent to the life of deep faith. In this story, we see kind of the mastery of Daniel and the life of deep faith. In the midst of, honestly, let's just say it, this is an impossible situation. The king wants someone to tell him what he dreamed and what it means, and he's not giving away any hints. Here is someone that is a master of that type of wisdom. And today I want us to just highlight what I see are examples of practical wisdom that we can get from this story. What can we get from this story? This is like a folk tale. What can we get from it? What does it have to say to us today? And I want us to look at the way Daniel handles himself in the midst of this story. What was his process while navigating this unique crisis that he suddenly found himself within? And in one sense, slide 2, in one sense, the text offers guidance to attending to life's impossible situations. Have you ever been faced with an impossible situation in life? At one time or another, it's going to happen. It's unavoidable. We all know it's coming. You can't insulate your life in such a way where you are impossible situation proof. It's going to happen to you. That's the tragedy of life, but that's also the beauty of life, that these type of things are given to us. And yet this story offers guidance in attending to life's impossible situations. What do you do when that day happens? When the impossible situation happens and arrives, what do you do? So, kind of the colloquialism, when the wheels fall off, when the unexpected happens. I think this type of story is given so that we may learn how to engage life in the power of the Spirit. Number one, how do we engage life in the power of the Spirit when these type of impossible situations happen? And number two, rather than our own strength and human wisdom, instead of engaging the impossible situation in that way, this is what we do. So point number one, I want us to, staying grounded. Whenever you read what Daniel was doing whenever this situation happened, is he stayed grounded. He was grounded, he was centered, as we might say here as friends. That after learning about what was going to happen, Daniel responded there with prudence and discretion, as the text says. And he was not mirroring the fearful, erratic, and insecure reactivity of Nebuchadnezzar. He reacted differently. He didn't let Nebuchadnezzar's kind of reactivity affect him. That's exactly what I think Nebuchadnezzar wants. Nebuchadnezzar wants everyone around him to feel how he feels, and even worse. And human beings, we can do that, can't we? The human situation is sometimes we can do this, where we want others to experience what we ourselves are experiencing. And I think that's what Nebuchadnezzar is doing in the text. He's in a situation that he doesn't understand, that he doesn't see, so he's going to thrust upon his court a request that is absolutely impossible to understand and to foresee. If it's happening to me, it's going to happen to you, in so many words. What do you do when that type of impossible situation happens? And yet Daniel doesn't give himself over to this emotional response, but he remains rational, he remains objective, and ultimately he remains grounded. He remains a grounded person, and a grounded person within character within this story. We might say he remains level-headed in this situation. So staying grounded, kind of reflecting on Daniel's response in this circumstance, is point number one, staying grounded. Number two, if we continue to look at Daniel's response and character and actions in the midst of the story, notice that he seeks out the sources of conflict. He goes and talks to the king. Well, first he goes and talks to the executioner. What's going on? Why? And then the text goes on to say he went in and requested that the king give him time. Now that was a bold move in that day and that time, to go in and to provide an option to the king. Often, I don't know about you, that whenever there are sources of conflict, whenever there are problems, we can often avoid the ones that we need to talk to, can't we? There's something in us that if there's some conflict with someone, I don't want to talk to this person. We can avoid them. But that's not what Daniel does. He goes and talks to the source of the crisis. He goes and talks to the king. I remember being a new pastor in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was sharing with a mentor that was assigned to me. I was sharing some problems with being a new pastor at an established church there in the west side of Cleveland. And I remember sharing this kind of situation and the circumstance of the story with this other minister. And this mentor's solution on what to do with this perceived issue and problem, he said, "Mark, you need to go eat with them." I remember that solution. It was kind of like a smack in the face, like, wait, what? I was kind of wanting them to side with me, side with my side of the story and see this person as the bad guy. Whereas his wisdom and his perspective was, you need to go eat with them. You need to go spend some time with them. If you're not getting along with this person, seek out the relationship. I think his point was how oftentimes many solutions to our conflicts can present themselves by seeking and strengthening the relationships that we have with the person, if that's possible. I know that that's not a universal solution for all times and all things, but oftentimes it's a pretty good rule that you can follow. Spend some time with the person that there's tension with. Spend some time with the person that you're in conflict with. Spend some time together and see if that knot can unravel and undo itself. As I was reflecting on Daniel's actions in this time of crisis, and I was reflecting on, all right, what were some other times where I experienced conflict and I was advised to go spend time with the person that I was in conflict with? That was ultimately my takeaway, That was the heart of the advice that was given during our election violence prevention workshop and our communication across differences workshops that we had this last month. Essentially, one of the main nuggets and takeaways of those workshops was nothing changes as long as we isolate ourselves from meeting, relationship, and conversation with those that we are in difference with. Nothing's going to change as long as you talk over there and there is no relationship over here with the person that you're in tension with. And we see that. We see Daniel challenging that in this text. And not only in these workshops, but I was also thinking of a historical Quaker figure. And I remember how Margaret Fell sought the audiences of the powers that be in her day and in her time, Oliver Cromwell, Charles II, James II. I did a little bit of, was doing a little bit of an internet research on who did Margaret Fell meet with whenever Quakers were being persecuted there in England for what they were doing. And what did she do? A source said she helped to sustain the movement through her large correspondence with other friends on a range of personal and religio-political topics. She traveled widely and spent extended periods of time in London petitioning the political authorities on behalf of persecuted Quakers. She was going to the source of crisis. She was going to where the problem was rising. She personally addressed Oliver Cromwell, Charles II, James II. She was willing to address the crisis in that direct way, much like we see Daniel doing in this story. In doing so, in doing the meetings, in doing the hard work of going and being with people that you are in conflict with, you're doing the necessary work that leads there to the third point, to engage in spiritual practices. There's a lot of work that goes into setting up the spiritual practices of prayer, of intercession, of fasting. The more specific that you can become, the better. It was only after he had talked to the king and after he had learned what was happening that he went to his home and informed his companions to seek mercy from God, the God of heaven, concerning this mystery. Before we engage in spiritual practices, you have to put in the inward and outward relational work about what you want to see changed and what you want to see happening. Spiritual power becomes muted and divested of its power whenever there is personal or interpersonal dishonesty and delusion. So if you're being dishonest with yourself and you're trying to engage in spiritual practice, or you're being dishonest in a crucial relationship, there's not going to be that spiritual oomph there in order to undo, in order to move the hand of God, so to speak. Daniel was keen on finding out the source of the crisis as a way to attend to the source of the solution. Go to the source of the problem so that you can, in an informed way, engage in spiritual practices and disciplines. We see this pop up again in the book of 1 Corinthians, where the Apostle Paul is writing the Corinthians, and he's worried about kind of that disconnect between the preaching of the word, the preaching of the gospel, and then the necessary work that goes into the gospel in embodying it. And he writes this. He's writing to the Corinthian church, "Do you remember how on a racing track, Every competitor runs, but only one wins the prize. Well, you ought to run with your minds fixed on winning the prize. Every competitor in athletic events goes into serious training. Athletes will take tremendous pains for a fading crown of leaves. But our contest is for an eternal crown that will never fade. I run the race then with determination. I am no shadow boxer. I really fight. I am my body's sternest master, for fear that when I have preached to others, I should myself be disqualified. Paul is talking about that reconciliation between what is happening on the inside and how that affects us and the world around us. Daniel 2 is a story of an informed spiritual practice rooted in the present context while turning to God for a mystery to be revealed. Daniel took certain specific steps in order for these things to happen. He made sure that he didn't kind of lose his head, lose his nerve. He made sure that he asked appropriate questions, and then he made sure that with what he found out and going to the right sources, he was able to engage in right spiritual practices. I always also assumed that whenever this story was writing, that he asked his friends to pray. It doesn't say that. It just says, seek the mercy of God. And however that plays out in our lives, however that plays out in our practices, what does it mean to you to seek the mercy of God? It very well could be prayer, but it doesn't have to be specifically that. What does seeking the mercy of God mean to you? Some queries as we go into a brief time of open worship. And in reflection of this text, in reflection of what Daniel did in this time of crisis. Number one, do you have established spiritual practices to help you stay grounded throughout the day? You notice that when the time came for Daniel to be grounded and to think critically, to think objectively, he didn't do that in the moment. He was in a point where he was already there, centered. So he was asking questions to the right people. Okay, where is this crisis coming from? Do you have those type of practices? Are you grounded throughout the day? Secondly, who might need to be sought out in your life to help dismantle unnecessary conflict or crisis? The usual practice is whenever there's conflict or tension or crisis within our relationships, we tend to back off. Whereas in this story of Daniel, it's a simple story of going to the problem. But not going there reactively, but going there grounded and mindful. Does that exist in your life today? Is there some work that needs to be done today? Thirdly, do you frequent prayer or spiritual disciplines personally? Do you do so with others, like Daniel did with his companions, his friends? Who are your companions that seek the mercy of God alongside you? Do you have a small company, a community, where you're able to exercise those spiritual disciplines together? I think this is one community. This is one arena that we do that. But then we oftentimes have a private community that we can do that with people. Considering these queries and considering our time together and this story that's familiar but also provides some new insights about attending to life and living life well, preparing for life, the things that come to us in life that no one wants to experience, but they do happen to us. What else could we learn from this second chapter of Daniel? This interesting and unique story that offers us a pattern to live by. Let us attend to the inward teacher, the seed of God, that inward voice, and let us set her down, dear friends. If you feel moved to share in vocal ministry, Carol has a microphone. I know we're a little on time because we shared about our dads, and I'm grateful for that. But let us just take a moment, find our center, and see how the Lord leads.